In today's video, we have all the latest NHL trade rumors heading towards the deadline involving teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, Vancouver Canucks, New York Rangers, and a few others. Plus, we also have news from the NHL waiver wire. We had a goalie goal in the American Hockey League the last couple days, and head coach Jon Cooper of the Lightning was kicked out of last night's game. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss here today. First up, some quick news from the NHL waiver wire. We saw the Winnipeg Jets place Austin Poganski on waivers yesterday. We found out today that he has indeed cleared and has been reassigned. The Jets were actually making room to reactivate Nick Ehlers off of long-term injury reserve. So certainly having Ehlers back in the lineup will be a big help to the Winnipeg Jets, who have been very inconsistent as of late, and certainly have a tall task in front of them to try to get themselves into the playoffs. They're certainly going to be a team that's going to be interesting to watch here, especially if they don't get in. You have to think some more additional changes are coming, but exactly who is going to go and who stays and all that, it's kind of difficult to say right now. There hasn't really been a ton of rumors around that team as of yet, but there's certainly going to be one to watch for sure. Now, as I mentioned, we also had a goalie goal. I meant to mention this in yesterday's video, but we kind of ran out of time. But Ejected Dostal, Anaheim Ducks prospect goalie, playing in the American Hockey League, of course, for the San Diego Gulls, a couple nights ago, actually scored from his own end. It's not something you see very often in professional hockey. A goalie scoring a goal, it's very rare. It's only happened a handful of times in AHL and NHL history, so it was interesting to see. Obviously, he's pretty good at handling the puck. He's obviously had a chance to play a little bit in Anaheim in the NHL, and really, in my opinion, it certainly has a real good shot at being the goalie of the future there in Anaheim, so that was kind of neat to see. And then, of course, another unique thing that we don't see very often either is we saw a head coach get kicked out of a game last night. The Lightning were playing the Pittsburgh Penguins, and head coach Jon Cooper was kicked out by referee Wes McCauley. Clearly, Cooper was not really happy with one of the penalty calls and was really giving it to Wes. You couldn't really hear exactly, what exactly he was saying word for word. But whatever it was he said, McCauley tossed him out. And I think that's the first time we've seen it since Peter DeBoer, I want to say about 4 years ago. I know Mike Sullivan was kicked out, I think not too long before that. I can't remember the exact time. But it's not something you see very often. I know I heard Elliotte Friedman make mention that he believes at the beginning of the season that referees were kind of given a little bit more stringent rules around not putting up with quite so much from coaches like that from the bench. So I don't know exactly what will come from it. I believe the Lightning play again tonight, and I think Wes McCauley is also the ref tonight. But a lot of what he was getting at Cooper was the fact that the Penguins are the least penalized team in the league. I believe he was calling them like America's team. I think it kind of sounded like he was almost accusing the refs of being, kind of favoritism towards the Pens. That's just my take on it. I can't say for sure that's what he was insinuating, but that's kind of the impression I had, which I kind of understand why maybe the refs' patience was pretty thin there, because I'm sure Wes McCauley's heard a lot worse than that, and he's usually one of the I guess more easier going refs with lots of personality, gets along well with, he's really well respected, and I can't imagine that, he would have heard anything that before that wouldn't have caused a coach to get kicked out, right? So it's just kind of, hard to say when they decide to do it, when they don't. I don't know, but it's certainly interesting to see what more comes from it and how that relationship might be impacted going forward. I know also heard Friedman make mention of this on the Jeff Merrick show today, talking about that situation. He made a good point. He's like, in Cooper's case, regardless if he gets fined or the team gets a penalty or he gets kicked out or whatever, there's a decent chance they might run into the Penguins in the playoffs. And at this point, he's kind of planting the seed for, what he perceives to be taking place with the Penguins not being penalized as much as other teams. And maybe he'll, get himself some more calls. I mean, we've seen it happen last year in the playoffs. You complain the right way, and all of a sudden things start to turn the tide a little bit sometimes. So maybe that's kind of more where he was going with that. I don't know. Anyways, there's two rare things that we don't get to see very often in professional hockey. A couple other things here as well. I know the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, made some headlines, you could say, for sure, when they did the offer sheet against Jesperi Kotkaniemi to Montreal Canadiens last offseason. Of course, a $6.1 million price tag surprised a ton of people. Not a huge shocker that the Habs decided to walk away and take the compensation. And now they're talking extension, I guess. And listening to reports from various NHL insiders, it sounds like they might be looking at a long-term deal for Kotkaniemi, well below that qualifying offer that would be required. Now, at this point, obviously, he signs the RFA 1-year deal, 6.1. Are they going to want to do another year or more at that level? No. I think it's fair to say, based on the recent reports, that all sides agree, including the team, player, and agent, that he has not lived up to a $6 million player. Now, they're happy with his play more recently. He seems to have settled in and kind of found more of a decent spot there in the lineup and kind of, being a little bit more consistent as of late. And it looks like they're probably looking at a 5 or 6 year deal, somewhere in that $4 to $4.5 million range. And to be honest, it's going to have to be in that range if they want to have any hope to keep him long term. And there's also some talk that it's kind of like Vincent Trocheck insurance in a way, because he's not too far away from being a UFA. And if they can't keep him, then Kotkaniemi can have a chance to kind of play a little higher in the lineup, and they'll have him sign longer term. He's still quite young, so we'll see where the contract negotiations go. But I think the Canes would really like to get something done before we get to the offseason for sure. A couple other quick notes as well, kind of connecting to the Russia-Ukraine situation and the impacts it's having on various players as well as the NHL. A couple additional players are leaving their team in the KHL. Lucas Wallstrom and Joakim Nordstrom both are leaving CSKA, who they both terminated their contracts and will not be participating in the KHL playoffs any longer, and they'll be heading back to Sweden. So we've seen numerous players that are not from Russia terminating their contracts and kind of getting out of there. So a few more guys do that. And the other thing that was surprising, we've seen a lot of NHL teams showing their support for the Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Like, for example, we saw the Winnipeg Jets do the anthem the other night. The Senators have announced that they're going to be doing the anthem at all of their home games for the rest of the season. But the Washington Capitals apparently are banning any kind of Ukrainian flags at their events, at their home games. So that seems kind of strange. Now, I know they have a large Russian contingency of players there, but still, that shouldn't really make a difference. I don't think. It's just kind of concerning, in my opinion, that they won't allow people to show support for Ukraine while at their games. A lot of other teams are showing support. They're taking the exact opposite stance, which is just, I don't know, not a good look in my opinion. They should be allowed and free to kind of show their support for whomever or whatever they want. If they want to bring a flag for Ukraine or whatever, just like the Russian flag or whatever, like, you're probably going to get people upset with you at this point, but whatever, you're allowed to do what you want. That's the whole point of it being a free country. So it's kind of surprising in a sense, but it is what it is, I guess. We'll see how the reaction goes and if they have a change of heart on that policy. Now, on to the trade rumors for today. We have a variety of teams. A lot of them are Canadian, of course. Let's start with the Ottawa Senators. Of course, they're going to be an interesting team to watch here. They are definitely going to be sellers going into the deadline, although I don't expect anything too drastic to happen. But a couple of players to keep your eye on. One would be defenseman Michael Del Zotto, who does have another year in his contract at $2 million. Started off the year at the NHL and kind of proved quickly, in my opinion, that he just can't play at a high enough level to be in the top six, at least in Ottawa, which really, if you can't be in the top 6D in Ottawa, hard to imagine how you can be in the top 6D in a lot of other teams. But they signed him to a 2-year deal at $2 million per season, and I was surprised when they did. He's a decent depth defenseman, but he's been tearing it up in the American Hockey League. He went down to the minors, hasn't really complained, at least not publicly, and has been doing phenomenal down there and is getting a fair bit of attention. Now, normally you'd think that extra year on the contract would kind of scare people away, but so far it doesn't seem to be based on the latest reports. But I know Ottawa would certainly love to move that contract, and they definitely need to do a better job of their pro scouting moving forward so they can sign or acquire some veteran guys to insulate and work with their homegrown talent here that can actually play at a higher level. The mistakes they've made when it comes to free agency in that regard the past couple of years have been really outstanding and been a big reason why this team hasn't taken even bigger steps forward. They've made some good progress, but there's a lot bigger progress that need to be taken again before they'll be a real serious playoff team or playoff contender. Of course, injuries have bit them hard this year. With Norris and Batherson being out long term, they had a real bad COVID issue early on. They had the flu running through their team here recently too. So they faced a ton of adversity this year. It's not the only reason that they're as low as they are in the standings, but their free agent signings have not really helped that much in that regard. Nick Paul's another name to watch as well. I think there's still a decent chance to get a deal done, but I know Frank Saravalli and other NHL insiders are saying that there's not a lot of progress made so far in the contract for Nick Paul. This is his first chance to be a UFA. Certainly been in the organization a long time. He was one of the main pieces that came over in the Jason Spezza trade from Dallas way back. And he's still there. It took a long time to get a regular spot with the Sens, but he's kind of like their utility knife kind of player. He goes up and down the lineup. He can play center. He can play left wing. Sometimes he goes into the top six. Sometimes he's a third, fourth liner. It just kind of depends on the night. When they have injuries, he's just one of those guys you can move around and get a real solid effort night in and night out. He's a real character player for them. Probably looking at a contract of probably 4 years or something like that. A 4 to 5 year deal for, I'm going to say, maybe $2.75 to $3 million range is probably what it's going to take to get him done. He's not really going to be commanding a ton of money. There's been some word that they were offering around 4 years, around 2 or a little bit better, and that's not quite where things are at. I mean, he may choose to want to explore the market first, hard to say, but if he's not signed by the time we get to the deadline, there's a real chance he'll get traded. Certainly there's a lot of teams are interested in a player like him. It's not going to cost a ton, and like I said, he's just a good utility player, add some extra depth, do a penalty kill, a little bit of offense, good on faceoffs, just really do all the little things right, makes a big difference there. So we'll see. Some believe the Senators as well might actually be in the market for a real hockey trade to improve the team for not just obviously this year, but for next year and beyond. So we'll see what else they might do. But I do expect at least a few veteran players to be on the move. When it comes to the Montreal Canadiens, there was a lot of talk about Jeff Petrie being a defenseman who won it out, and he was playing like it for a long time as well. You can understand that based on how he looked on the ice, you could think that he wasn't trying awfully hard and was trying to get himself, out of there. But that's not going to get the job done. But since they've got a new coach, Marty St. Louis, he's kind of really get this team going at a much better pace, much better rate. They're winning games, not all of them, of course, but they're certainly doing a lot better. And Petrie seems to be having fun again. I know there's been some talk of, well, maybe he will want to stay. Maybe they won't move him after all. But according to Pierre LeBrun, there's still a really good chance that the Montreal Canadiens do move Jeff Petrie. Regardless of what he thinks, it still makes a lot of sense if they're going to be rebuilding and retooling here that, at his age with that contract, if they can find a taker, then it might be best he move on. I mean, if they can't and he stays, well, certainly he's playing a lot better under St. Louis, and maybe it's for, might be a decent move for his career to remain there, but I think they'd probably like the flexibility for the cap and maybe find a younger player to take that role on if they're able to. So we'll see. As I mentioned before, I really think Detroit's a real solid landing spot, and we can look to maybe the Flyers if Rasmus Ristolainen ends up moving on. Maybe the Dallas Stars. I'm not completely sold on them, but where they're likely losing John Klingberg soon, it's possible they could maybe look to replace him with a guy like Petrie, but I think a lot of their other moves will, in the offseason, will happen first. Most likely a Petrie trade is more likely in the summer than it is at the deadline. Now, when it comes to the Canucks, we've heard a lot about a variety of players. There's a lot of talk about JT Miller maybe going to Colorado. That's the latest rumor on him. And maybe Bo Byram being one of the players going back the other way, somebody that the Canucks really like, which is not a shocker at all. Not convinced that's going to happen. I really think Miller, really high chance he stays in Vancouver. But one player out of, it's a little bit flies more under the radar that is more likely to get traded is Tyler Mott. Now, Tyler Mott's likely looking for a contract similar to like a Sean Corelli type of deal, same as a Nick Paul, probably in that 4-year range, around $2.75 million. And he's a player that is getting a lot of interest at the trade deadline here as well. So as much as a lot of the bigger names in Vancouver seem to get all the media attention on the trade talk going to the deadline, he's a low-key kind of player who could actually give them a decent return here as well. Now, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, I know we've talked a lot about their goaltending situation here as of late, but the latest reports from NHL insiders like Elliot Friedman, Darren Dreger, and others, Pierre LeBrun, all talking about the fact that the Maple Leafs likely do have to run with what they have for goaltending. And like I said on the Marc-Andre Fleury rumor yesterday, like I don't take it all that seriously. I don't think it's something they can easily do. I mean, yeah, could they use a goaltending upgrade? I think they really could. Is it the most likely, logical thing we see? No, it's not. Just because they have some other issues they need, and really Campbell has proven he can be better, and I think they're more likely and better off to try to get him back on his game, because he can be the right goalie who can get the job done for them when he's playing at the top of his game and being the best version of Jack Campbell that we've seen. But, for example, left shot defense is by far, I think, their biggest area that they want to address here. Of course, the Jake Muzzin injury is, certainly concerning. They don't know how long he's going to be out, but I think it would have been an area that they would have been looking to address anyway. And according to Friedman, they're interested in a variety of players from the Ducks here, including the defenseman Hampus Lindholm and Josh Manson. Now, with Lindholm being the lefty, I think there's a greater chance that he would be the guy they target, but they've certainly had an eye on Josh Manson for a long time as well. I can't see a scenario unfolding where they get both of them, as much as that would be a fun concept for Leaf fans to really make this blue line a lot better going to the deadline. You have to think there's a real chance there that one of them now could end up in Toronto. The interest is there. They've been linked to other defensemen, but really, Hampus Lindholm is probably, outside of Jacob Chychrun, who's a lot younger and certainly comes with term, but of all the rental defensemen, and even really, you could even say amongst the guys with term, Lindholm's probably the best guy that's available. And he's only going to be available if he's not signed. The Ducks are rumored to be interested in signing him and are going to take a run at it, but if they don't get it done, then Pat Verbeek's made it known that if you're not signed and you're a Duck at the deadline, you're probably going to be traded, or at least we're going to be having conversations to try to bring back assets in their return. It only makes sense. They can't afford to let players go for nothing. So in that regard, to me, Lindholm's a more likely target, but I wouldn't rule out Manson. But I do think the odds of the Ducks getting at least one of those two players signed are probably pretty good. They would be in quite a mess if both of them end up departing via free agency. But I can't think of anybody better myself who really brings a good variety of skill set and puck moving and experience, etc. That would be great for the Leafs would be Hampus Lindholm. Yes, they could prove they could have somebody who can play physical and all that, but they already acquired Ilya Lyubushkin. If they get Muzzin back, then they certainly have that physicality back there. They could really use a guy like Lindholm to kind of cement Riley as being the next top puck moving guy back there as well, and really kind of create more from the back end. So to me, it makes a lot of sense. We'll see where time and everything goes here if they make a deal with the Ducks. It's hard to say exactly what the Maple Leafs would want to give the Ducks in return. I don't know if they're going to be too crazy with a first-round pick for a rental, but they may not have a choice but to give up something significant if they are going to land a guy like Lindholm. Now, the Rangers, we know, are certainly looking at a variety of players as well. They've been linked to a lot of different people out there, but another Anaheim Duck that, according to some NHL insiders like Frank Seravalli, that's on their radar is Rickard Rakell. Now, of course, JT Miller's also been mentioned. Darren Dreger also mentioned this here as well, talking about the Rangers. But with Miller probably being a player of interest to the Rangers, but I don't think the Canucks are going to trade him. I think a guy like Rakell could be somebody that they turn to next. Obviously, a lot of the insiders feel like Rakell is one of the more likely Ducks to get traded. Like I said, he's a versatile player. He can play center. He can play both right wing and left wing. He's an offensive guy, at least he has been in the past. So to me, he could certainly add another dimension who can move around in their lineup and be an extra utility piece for them and really add some extra depth and be a really good option. Now, of course, there's other players out there who could also fit those needs, but like I said, Dreger was mentioning that Rakell is on the Rangers' radar. So I do suspect the Rangers are going to make a trade, and I do suspect it's going to be a forward who can play in the top six. It's just a matter of who is it going to be, but Rakell could be one of the answers to those potential players who could fit that bill. So let me know your thoughts on what we discussed here today down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.